Starting the broadcast is now live to no one but us. All right, I'm going to play the music in the mental count of 5. We're going to redo that because I just realized we didn't discuss. With this format, you need to know what episode number this is. This is episode 247.
247?
247.
Bring it.
All right, I'm going to hold up my hand to remind myself later.
This time. Wait a minute. Time out. So I can't remember. So I should be saying ECHORIFT episode 247?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to do this. Like, I just dug out the old
No. I want to. I desperately want to, but I can't. I have to remember what that is, and I'll get it.
In the gap, you say ECHORIFT episode 247, and then I say is on, and then the music kicks back in. Like, it's
okay. Yep. No, we're good.
And then once the music goes down, I'll do the intro. And then when I'm done saying, and anything else our producer can think of, you then say this time on ECHORIFT the boys talk about.
Now, it sounded like the music was being faded out.
Well, I turned it off and it fades out. It doesn't stop abruptly because it's like a cart program.
No. What I mean was, it sounded like the way this used to sound to me is the music was the volume, and then there was a break, and then I spoke, and then it came back to full volume, and then it went on, and then it. Right? Am I?
Well, let me play it.
Okay.
And then I just artificially toned it down.
No, but okay, so maybe it's my headphones or whatever, but even the second time we listened to that, it was fading down.
Okay, let's do
in a way that I don't ever remember hearing it fade down before.
Let's do the thing that I just got done saying we weren't going to do, because I think that's why. Hit the settings button where you do the microphone and everything. And then the very last drop down says voice.
Well, hang on, I'm not even there. Okay. Settings, microphone, sound?
Settings, and then at the very bottom you'll see a drop down that says voice. Change that to studio.
What tool are we in right now?
Okay, in Google Hangouts.
Okay.
Click the gear, the settings button.
Okay.
And then you'll see it says your webcam, and then your microphone, and then your speaker, and then below that there's play test sound, and then there's a drop down that says voice.
Yeah, I see that.
Hit that and select studio.
I just hit studio.
Click save.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to try it again.
Now your voice quality changed dramatically.
Yeah, because it's not doing its own auto ducking anymore. It's letting our microphones do the work.
Okay.
Well, let me just play this. We can switch back, but let me just play this and see if you have any different experience listening to it. Did that sound the same as before?
It didn't. I didn't hear any fade. In other words, it sounded the way I used to remember it sounding. But the first two times, on its own, it was fading out.
Yeah, that's because of the voice mode. Voice mode is the software saying, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to try to make your podcast sound really good. And you go into studio mode, and it's saying, okay, you know how to make your sound good, so we're not going to help. And some of the things it does is that auto ducking, where it'll automatically lower and raise voices. So we turn that off, and now it's basically taking the raw audio from our computers.
Okay, and by the way, the sound. Well, my voice still sounds not great, but the sound of your voice and the sound of the music, the fidelity was better.
Yeah.
It's better now than it was 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So then we'll stick with this.
Okay.
Before, I knew about this all along, but we were having so many problems I didn't want to add another configuration element.
Okay. But okay, that's fine.
Well, no, what do you have to...
So when we started just a minute ago, before we switched this back, did the sound, like the sound from the moment we started recording, when we were trying to get serious about recording, 10 minutes ago when I wasn't prepared for the fade out, was our sound different before that?
Yes, we were in the voice mode.
No, we were just in voice mode and we went out of it to go to studio mode. I get
Right.
that. But before all of this started, have we been in voice mode the whole night?
Yes. Because you have to deliberately select studio mode.
No, I got it. I'm just because okay, that's fine. I'm something about the quality seemed to be significantly worse in the last 5 minutes before you went to studio.
Okay.
And I don't know. I clearly it was my imagination or whatever.
Well,
but,
or it's because I pressed start broadcast. I mean, maybe that does something, because that's one other thing that changed is I clicked start broadcast, and now we're broadcasting. I mean, nobody can see it, but we're broadcasting.
Okay. All right. I guess we're good to go.
Okay. Actually, make a note. Around 7 minutes. All right, I'm going to press the thing again. My visual cue for myself.
What's the episode number?
Hold on. 247.
Okay, sorry.
All right. I'm going to do something different. White out. I should see the white out.
ECHORIFT episode 247
is on. Welcome to the ECHORIFT show. I'm Don.
And I'm Mike.
And we're the creators of ECHORIFT Comics. Each episode we bring you the best in comics, movies, television, books, fast food, and anything else our producer can think of.
This time on ECHORIFT, the boys gaze into the Oculus.
Starring Karen Gillan of Doctor Who fame, directed by Mike Flannigan. It also has Starbuck in it, Katie Sackhoff. Now, you saw this movie when it was in theaters, right?
I did, Don. I never miss a horror movie in theaters. Horror, I say. And I took our producer, Hans, and he was very anxious. I think he talked about it before.
Yeah, that's right. We did. And it's funny, I think I made you aware of the movie because I guess on some Doctor Who blog I had seen that Karen Gillan was in a movie. And then I watched the trailer, and something about the trailer looked, and I think it was an early teaser or something. I was like all excited, and then I watched the trailer, and something about the way it was cut made it look, I don't know, like low rent or not for me. And then you went to see it, and you've been singing its praises. And you would usually, the way it works between the two of us, if we'll agree that I'm not likely to see a movie or something, and then Mike will proceed to tell me about it. And I think I even told you to stop because I decided I did want to see it.
Yeah, like I've said with other movies, and I'll say it again, I had no data at all for this movie. You told me about the name, then I looked up the movie times, and I think I knew that Karen Gillan was in it, but I'm not even sure if I knew that. So when I went to see the movie, I had no idea if it sounded like science fiction horror to me, but the title, and it wasn't, obviously, but it was a miraculous sort of movie experience because I had no idea if I was seeing a monster movie or a zombie movie or a science fiction movie or horror. Even as the movie's unfolding, I didn't know what I was going to be encountering. And So as a result, it was one of the most, and for reasons that become obvious if you see the movie, it was one of the most disorienting film experiences I've had in a long time, and it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I had some sense of it because, like I had agreed to have you tell me about the movie. So I knew that it had this aspect of two stories at two different times, pretty much being told at the same time. I think that was the hook that made me say, okay, don't tell me anymore. I do want to see this. And I did sort of know that was going to occur, and the movie introduces you to that very quickly. But I really like the way this movie presents everything to do. Like, let's talk about the mirror. So the Oculus is a mirror, right? And it's a haunted movie. It's a haunted object. It's a movie about a haunted object.
Yeah, I think it's the part of the cursed object genre, Don.
Yeah, and it was neat. I was reading about the director because I was interested enough after I saw the movie to find out more. And he said that he imagined it being like the mansion in The Shining, but portable. So like it could be taken and brought places, which I thought was really cool. And that's sort of the way he approached it, and it also, in his opinion, behaves a lot like the not the mansion, the hotel in The Shining, in that it's very mysterious and it hallucinates and it makes you see things and all kinds of other things. And I think that's a pretty neat premise.
Yeah, it's something that Stephen King wrote another story called, I think it's not Room 237. That's the room from The Shining, but it's like 1408 or something. John Cusack was in the movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's a short story, and it has all the creep factor of The Shining sort of condensed. In that book, the main character is going to write a story about a room that's supposed to be bad luck in a famous hotel, and the best part of that story, like this one, is the exposition. And I've said this before. People like rip on exposition. I love exposition. I love when a character just lays everything out,
right?
And because it's akin to telling a ghost story or telling a yarn. And if you do it right, as a storyteller, even in a film where you'd say, well, can't you just show it? Do you have to say it? Sometimes a credible witness is the best mechanism to tell a story. And so I'll give you the Stephen King, and then we can talk about Oculus. In the Stephen King story, the manager of the hotel is basically telling the author, you're about to go into this room, and he lays out all these things that have happened. It's not clear if he even buys into it, but he definitely has experienced the symptoms of this cursed room. And in Oculus, one of the best elements in the first, I guess it's probably the first act of the film, is when Karen Gillan's character is laying out the history of the mirror to her brother.
I was thinking about how cleverly that was handled, because it was handled. There were sufficient interruptions when she was telling her story. Like, she goes through, and she probably does 10 straight minutes of discussion, and I think there's like a minor interruption. And I remember watching it. It's not often I let myself get taken out of a movie to sort of analyze it, but I was watching, I thought, that's kind of neat, the way that they decided to have, like, that was their mechanism for being able to have her do all this description. And she's holding up pictures and doing things like that, and her brother interrupts her at least once, and I think one other time maybe one of the alarms in the room goes off. But it was a very cool presentation. And it's interesting that you bring up the exposition, because we just got done watching the Oculus is based on a short film by the same director, and it was sort of a movie, I think 2005 he made it, and it was the movie he deliberately made. He was already in Hollywood working on television and things, and he deliberately made this horror movie to try to get out there. It's a half an hour long and be noticed, and it worked, and this ended up being a pitch for his first feature film. But in that one, it's even lower fi. And I was thinking, when you were just talking about exposition, I was thinking about how the exposition in that short film is even more direct and even more straightforward than even the movie. And the movie's still pretty straightforward. But it's just got a little more. Maybe it's a little more Hollywood, or a little more somebody else saying, okay, you can't, you can do this. We're going to let you, but you can't go too far. But you got to have some interruptions and things.
Yeah, and this movie is such a good taut film that it's best if you just go and watch it, without listening to anything more, because the simplicity of the threat and the cleverness of the filmmaking, like even in the 30-minute short that he did, that was so great to watch. That I love seeing essentially what amounts to a sketch or a work in progress, and then seeing how that same story was expanded to be feature film length in very clever and sort of unexpected ways without ever really leaving the original story. So in other words, the movie has significant amounts of more information, yet it's essentially the same story, even down to the main character in this is essentially one of the characters from the short film.
Yeah, in the short film, it's a similar situation. It's a man who's playing the Karen Gillan role, and he's got no sibling, and he refers to the family that is in the movie Oculus, which is neat, and all the references to the Lassiter glass or the Lasser glass, all that stuff. They didn't rename anything. Like if you watch the short film, it's all the same names. And then at one point, when he's rattling off the list of victims for this haunted mirror or cursed mirror, he names that family, and he refers to the husband and murder, suicide, and all these other things.
Yeah, and you know, this when I saw this in theaters, I saw it with a couple of friends, and women, 2 women.
Look at you.
And yeah, and when we left the theater, I was really shaken by the movie, and I could not figure out, like, there was a level of intensity that it was almost. I was having trouble handling it. Like, I was ready for the movie to let me off the hook after, like, I was ready for the end of the movie. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I wasn't looking forward to the end. I wanted to get away from the mirror.
Right.
And it's because of the score. There's essentially no music in the movie. It's almost all this
it's electronic.
It's like this low rumble. It's this like whoa, this very bassy sound that's omnipresent, and it is relentless. I mean, it's from I think it might be in the opening frames of the film, and it's definitely there in the final frames of the film.
Yeah,
and it just never lets you relax or get comfortable. And what's cool is in the very beginning of the short film, that music or something very much like it is present in that short film. So it's cool that the filmmaker had that idea from the get-go. It wasn't just a decision made by a composer.
Yeah, and I think it was the same person. I think that's cool. And if you go, and it's interesting because when I was looking at the Wikipedia page, they list on the soundtrack, they list like 24 tracks. So it's interesting that, like, it's this thematic piece of music, and I think there are times, if memory serves, where there is a tune to it, like occasionally, like there's some musical elements to it, but like you said, it's mostly sounds, and it's mostly sound effect, and it makes you unnerved. And it one of the things I like about it is, I'm on record as not being someone who like, I don't go see every horror movie. And the thing that when I really value and the horror movies that I really love, they're movies that have elements like that, and they're movies that, because we actually switched off of something I don't want to completely leave from, which is the constraints of the story, the constraints of the fact that it's not constrained, it's just a coincidence when it comes to the feature film, that almost the entire movie takes place in one house. But I love, and then the short film all takes place in one room. And I love stories like that, whether they're books, whether they're comics, whether they're movies. I love constraints. Like I think there's something about testing limits, but I also think there's something about recognizing that filmmakers and people who make comics and people who write books are a part of a commercial art form, and there are constraints. So there's something neat about when you put constraints on yourself and make something happen, and you really feel that in the Oculus short film. You feel the constraints because you can see the constraints right there on the film. But in the movie, you don't see the constraints because the movie's got plenty of budget to accomplish everything very well, and it's got a great director of photography and lighting and all that other stuff. But I love that kind of limited. I like when artists put themselves in a box sort of and make themselves work there, because sometimes I think that's the best work.
Yeah, and it's cool. I mean, it also ties into the concept of, clear visible goals for your audience. So once, a clear visible goal is, it's establishing what kind of action you'll expect to see by the end of the movie. And also, it gives you a sense of the duration. I mean, typically there's a time implied that you as an audience member can actually sort of mark. So for instance, in this, the sister says to the brother, I need you to meet me somewhere, and it ends up being, at their house, and he's thinking it's her house where she's living with her fiance, and she means no, the house we grew up in, and that she's had the mirror delivered there, and that she intends to do something tonight,
Yeah.
And it's evident that this story is going to unfold in one evening, and that it is going to, from that moment forward, that they have, before dawn, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So that's another example of just the dread that, that this isn't going to linger, that their situation is going to deteriorate almost instantly. And one of the brilliant moments in this movie is, if you recall, she's telling the story to her brother. She's recounting things, and her brother is basically not agreeing with her memory of their childhood in this house with this thing that destroyed their family.
Yeah.
And he's actually trying to put it behind him because he had been in a psychiatric ward. So now it appears that he's the sane one and she's the crazy one, and she plays a great, again, just that she seems off by the time she's done telling her story to him.
And she even seems, I think she did a really good job. One of the things I was saying to you, which has nothing to do with the movie or anything, I'm so familiar with her from watching 40 hours of her with her natural Scottish accent on Doctor Who. It was a little disorienting to see her, not be Scottish. But then it hit me that she was doing something really brilliant where even from the first moment you see her, she's a little off. Like even before what you just described, like what you just described is almost like the peak of that. And then they have an argument where she's at the end and breaks. But even in the beginning, when you're just seeing her as like a sort of an art dealer, an antiques dealer, and she meets her brother, after he leaves the hospital, there's just something a little off about her the whole time. And you're not like, you don't quite fall in love with her right away, or it's not that you don't fall in love with her like she's unlikable, but you're like hesitant to give yourself to her because there's just something a little off. And it's what she's saying. It's appropriate for the character and it's really effective.
Yeah, she seems twisted. She's talking to a mirror in certain scenes. She seems to be seeing things that aren't there. She's got this sort of hunger about something that's about to occur that her brother, who seems like a sympathetic character, she's an aggressive character. Her brother is mildly threatened by her. His sanity is being sort of toyed with by someone who apparently might actually be insane and not recovered.
Well, and you feel bad for him almost because she's like undoing all the good work. Because one of the things about this movie is that it's a long time into the movie before anything happens that makes you question before anything happens that makes you say, okay, maybe this is a cursed object.
Well, that moment we're not even need to give it away, but there is a moment when she is broken down and what she's trying to prove doesn't seem to be happening. And she walks back into the room and she lights up.
Yeah.
And she's thrilled at what she's seeing. And what she's seeing is really sinister, but it's the evidence she's been trying to prove exists through scientific methods, which is one of the coolest things. She's got the cameras going and recorders and a whole system.
And one of the things I also like about this movie, and all the best horror movies and science fiction movies make you think. And one of the things that she presents is that the mirror makes you believe you're doing things one way or makes you believe that you're doing something you're not actually doing. It tricks you. I'll give an example because if you're this far into it, you've probably seen the movie but there's a sequence where somebody, I won't actually be that specific, somebody thinks they're doing something to their finger that's very benign, like picking at it or something, and it turns out they're actually doing very serious bodily harm to themselves. And so as soon as you have that presented to you as a possibility, and that's something that the way this Oculus operates, and again, this is even at a time in the movie where you're not sure if it's really a supernatural thing or not. That it's really gets your brain thinking, and you start to wonder, okay, well then what am I watching, and can I trust it? And it's another thing that was pretty cool. The director, he shopped it around to be a feature film, and he had a lot of interest in the beginning, and everyone wanted him to make it a found footage movie, and he wouldn't do it. And then when he finally landed with I forget the name of the company, but it's that James Blum guy. It's the guy who does, I think he did Insidious. He did the Paranormal Activity. He does the low budget, high profit horror movies.
Okay.
And when they called him, they said, we want to make this a movie, but you're not allowed to make it a found footage movie. And I thought it was cool that he was like, good, because I found my match because everybody else required that. But the whole point of why he didn't want it to be a found footage movie is he wanted the audience to have an unreliable narrator in the film mirror. And he wanted the person filming the movie to not be reliable. And if it's found footage, then whatever you see in the footage is what's actually occurring. So like that doesn't work for this movie. And it was cool that he recognized that, and that the one studio that he ended up going with and making a successful movie with recognized that when they hired him.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning about the simplicity of this. Now, this is a movie that might have worked as a found footage film, and I'm glad, and I like those films almost 100%. I'm behind those because even if they're lousy, I think that they're an experience, and like that's the minimum I'm hoping for. But this was there was such a style to this. Like there's a whole element of the characters from the first time they had the problem as children encountering the mirror, and then as adults, going to destroy the mirror. Like fantastic mission. I mean, the characters are smart and heroic and perfect. I don't think you could have pulled it off quite the way they do if you hadn't done a traditional film. But they're interacting with themselves as kids with like some of the best casting of children I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And because the kids, it's funny, my greatest levels of admiration for the two adult characters come from the bravery of them as children. And like the girl especially, she takes on a level of courage. Like there's a scene where she's talking about how the father has basically succumbed to the mirror, and the kids have to make a decision to sort of go against his rules. And the son says, Dad said not to do whatever. And she goes, I don't care what Dad said. And it was a great moment to see her realize that for the sake of the mother, that this girl had to become an adult, like there. But the point I was starting to make is there's this, by the end of the film, the characters are sort of interacting with themselves at different ages. And having even seen it the second time, I don't even know what the filmmaker intended other than to tell the two different periods of time with the same exact screen time.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Like, it's brilliant to show that things are repeating themselves and just almost overlay the two events.
You know what else is brilliant? And you talked about this a little bit earlier, but the fact that in the present, the movie takes place in the span of 8 hours, 9 hours. But the flashbacks, which are fascinating because they're interspersed with over the same 8 hours, take place over like a week.
Yeah.
Or maybe even more. And it was pretty neat that there's like, he took a lot of risks, because I think that like if I were writing that, I'd be worried that, well, no, I can't like have the time to store it like that, because that'd be too confusing. And it worked out fine, but it's really interesting that you're first introduced in flashback to the family moving into a new house, which is I actually smiled like in a good way, because it's such a horror movie sort of trope of like, okay, moving into a new house, and then of course there's this new piece of furniture. And then you realize that it's like weeks have gone by, or a week has gone by at the very least, because you see the house get put together and everybody moves in and stuff. Yet in the present, what's neat about it is she's antagonizing the Oculus. Like, she has set up like weapons and alarms and cameras and backup power supplies on top of backup power supplies, and she's measuring the range of the thing's power. And I mean, there's all this like neat, really well thought out and clever stuff, and it's all stuff she learned from research and her own personal experience from when she dealt with it as a child. And it's a really neat sort of time trip that he gets away with.
Yeah, it is wild what they were able to do with just an object. I mean, the menace of it's often not even filmed all that much. Especially, it's hard to point a camera at a mirror to begin with, because you have to deal with reflections. I mean, nowadays with CGI they don't, but the mirror is it's just looming there at all times in the background. I mean, like, it's almost unnerving when it's not on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, and it doesn't have the ability to lurk or leave the room, but its radius of its effect is like, you know that they pretty much, from the moment they come into the space with it, they're going to have a lot of difficulty escaping it because of the way it confuses their experience. And there's a moment, it's funny, we go back to exposition and storytelling. I just think it's brilliant, and it's an example of why this movie works. This movie works with almost no gore, almost no monsters. I mean, there's some elements of haunting images. When it's at its best when the characters are just describing things. There's a scene where the mother, who is dead when the film opens, but she's alive in flashbacks, she's talking to the kids, and she believes that the father's cheating because his behavior, because he's being seduced by something. She assumes it's a woman, and one of the kids mentions that they saw a woman. And then later, and this was kind of a more innocent sighting of the woman. Later, the kid says, the son says he saw the woman. The mother says, well, did you see the woman? He says, yeah, I saw her again. And she says, where was he? And the kid's very scared. And he says, I saw her on the stairs, which is just creepy because she's outside of the office where the mirror is. And then she said, well, what was she doing? He goes, I don't know. I looked away. And like the idea of what is that even? That is brilliant writing and brilliant performance, that the woman, whatever that thing is, was outside the office and she was onto the stairs, but the kid was too scared to even determine what it was she was doing on the stairs.
Yeah.
Implying something more than just climbing them up or down.
Yeah, yeah. The movie
classy movie.
The movie is full of clever stuff like that. Like when the and you really don't realize it until hindsight. But when the daughter, she's outside and she's looking in the father's office window, and that's when she sees the woman dressed in black, like sort of rubbing his shoulders. And then, not only that, but when they both see that she's outside, the woman sort of slinks back. So I love thinking about how it's, first of all, that hadn't left the room yet, which is cool. Like she saw it, but it was in the room still. And also that, like, you almost get the impression in hindsight that the thing was intending for her to draw the conclusion that there was something going on there. Like if it had not snuck away looking guilty, then maybe she would draw a different conclusion of some kind. And it's all really, really clever the way it's handled.
Yeah, it's just, I really recommend it. It is a real experience. And even the second time, like as soon as the movie ended, the second time I saw it, when I saw it with you, I forget what I said, but the movie really just delivers. Like it does not let you off the hook. I knew everything that was going to happen, and so I was in dread mode even more than the first time I saw it.
Yeah, and though it doesn't have a Night Shyamalan type ending, it's one of those movies that benefits from multiple viewings anyway. Like I would imagine anyone who likes the movie is going to have to see it 2 or 3 times because you're going to pick up things.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you made a comment, and I was going to say it as a compliment, but you had made a comment that it wasn't that gory. I was thinking about how it was a lot gorier than horror movies that I like. And I don't want to give the wrong impression. That does not mean that doesn't mean it's Friday the 13th. You got to imagine the movies I like. I like The Conjuring, which I don't think has any gore in it. It just has fright and things like that. So there's like blood. Like, that's what I'll say. There are multiple situations of blood and like self-immolation or immolation, abuse. And I remember I was actually thinking when I saw the movie that I don't usually like a movie that does these things. And again, I do not want to oversell it, but it was funny that I like it. Like, not despite that, I like it with that. Like, it really fit. I don't know how to explain it better. Like, maybe the way a war movie, like gore fits in a war movie when it's done right and it doesn't seem exploitive or anything like that. And I was really surprised. But that's definitely a my personal taste thing. And I was reflecting on the horror movies that I like. And I was thinking about how, like, I don't think The Ring really has stuff like that. Like, the movies that I would say are, like, my top-notch favorites. And this is certainly among them at this point.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you just get to see, even with the elements you're talking about, you just get to see how, and because you've had the exposition about what happened to the previous victims of the mirror, and basically 100% success rate for the mirror.
Yeah.
The mirror has been able to protect itself and move all over the place and disappear and show back up in other places in history and prominent places. I mean, the mirror has had a very, very successful run. And and it encounters these 2 kids, and you come to get the sense that other people might have even tried what they did before.
Yeah.
Probably not as cleverly, but everything you see that's going on with them, like there's the scene from the trailer that I know you were referring to with the apple and the light bulb.
Yeah.
And that scene, more than anything, is as upsetting as that was initially. It's interesting to see that things aren't necessarily what they seem. But that, more than anything, demonstrated the real peril that they were in. That distinguishing reality from fantasy would become so difficult that you wouldn't necessarily know where you were. Am I still near the mirror? Have I gotten away from the mirror?
Plus, it's a case that's been proven to us. The one fact that's been proven to us at that point in the movie is that it's usually it's usually the direction we saw, and it doesn't go back, which is you think you're doing something benign and you are actually harming yourself,
or the reverse.
Yeah, yeah.
You think you're
And
harming yourself and you're not, and nothing's happening.
well, and this sort of does like both. Like it starts one way and ends another. And I remember thinking while I was watching, because I'm somebody who is really affected negatively by like gore in a movie, and it's not overdone. I mean, the movie's probably still PG-13. I don't remember, but when that scene happened, it's at a point in the movie when I thought, wow, this movie is either going to get real strange, like if she's truly like just sliced up her whole inside of her mouth, like this movie's going to get really, really daring, or this is a fake. And it actually put me at ease, like as somebody who doesn't who gets upset by gore and blood in particular. It put me at ease, that thought. And I have to wonder if the director knew that, like when he was editing it and putting it together, and people just being like, it could be like there's enough of a scare, like because it's at the point in the movie and a point in the storyline where it could be that this is the beginning of the end for them bodily. And
Well,
it's a cool scene.
The long game of the mirror, which is obviously has been around a lot longer than these two kids. The long game of the mirror is to fool you in one direction so that it can later fool you in another.
Yeah.
And that's just what, like, the whole, like, I go back to the idea of disorienting. Everything about the filmmaking of this was disorienting. And that is also all present in the short film, which again is just the short film. It's a short film. It's a film you and I could film tonight if we wanted to. I mean, we'd be ripping it off, but I mean it's that simplistic. There's no special sound apparent.
And it's not even a special. It's not even a special like setting. Even like you like it's like theater. Like there's points where you can tell they constructed a room, and you can see like where the seams on the room are and stuff. And it's a one-man show, and if you go to YouTube and just YouTube Oculus short film, there's like a Russian version of it, like because that's I guess how people get away with piracy, and it's called Part 3. Don't let that fool you, or Chapter 3 or something like that.
Chapter 3.
It was part of an anthology, and that's why it says 3. But it's a half an hour long. You'll be engrossed from beginning to end. In fact, if you're even wondering if you want to see the movie, it's a good teaser for the movie because it's sufficiently different. Like, and then when you see the things that are similar, like the stories he tells, it'll just be cool. Like while you're watching the movie. One of the things I thought was neat, and this is a little off of I thought it was neat that Katie Sackhoff was playing a sort of feminine woman. And let me explain what I mean by that. My exposure to her is she's such a good badass. So feminine is probably the wrong word. She's such a good badass. And I really know her as Starbuck. I know her in Longmire, where she's a badass sheriff. And I know her from, I think she was on that Bionic Woman show. And she seemed like she's always cast as like the female Navy SEAL equivalent. And it was really neat to see her sort of in a different role than we've seen her in before, where she's the mom, and it was neat to get to see her as an actress get to do that other part, like almost like they because you got to wonder when people start getting typecast, like is that typecasting, and are they not, like does she try out for the mom role and they don't give it to her? But it was neat that she was doing that, and it really, she adds a lot because she's a real class act and she does such a good job, and she's so convincing and terrifying and heartbreaking and everything as the mother of these two kids.
Yeah, she plays a very maternal role, and it's not something you're used to seeing her in, and she's playing a sympathetic role again, which isn't something you're used to seeing her. And she's vulnerable, and she's eventually, because of the mirror, she's very insecure. When she otherwise wouldn't be, and from a standpoint of performance, we haven't seen her play those kinds of characters. Yeah, I thought that was cool because when I first saw her in the movie, I thought she's going to be like a bad A, and that wouldn't have made sense for this film. And it's kind of cool to see that she's someone who likes her performances. I like seeing that she's getting an opportunity to do other stuff.
Yeah, like as her sanity degrades, like you're feeling terrible for her. You're feeling terrible for her children who have to deal with it. It's just it's a really well done movie, and like you just got done saying, I really recommend it.
It's not a feel good movie.
No, it's back in that I never and it's funny, he was talking about his next movie. It's called Somnia. It's already filmed and it's coming out next year. And he was talking about how it's a heartfelt horror movie, which I'm fascinated to see what that means. But it goes back to that thing. I think we've discussed it on the show. If I remember someone declaring that a true horror movie ends bad, and there's no such thing as a true horror movie that
was me, Don.
And this fits that mold. But I think The Conjuring ends with good, and that qualified. So, but it's a pretty good sense, and I think and it's just kind of like all romance movies. Like you can tell a love story from a romantic comedy, because love stories always end in tragedy, like the Titanic and Brian's song and stuff.
Romeo and Juliet.
The Fault in Our Stars. And then romantic comedies always end in happy, everybody gets what they need.
Yes, the lovers are together at the end of romantic comedies, and they are apart at the end of romance movies.
And horror movies mostly end bad. And even if they do end up good, it's bittersweet, like Alien. It ends good, but it's very bittersweet because she's alone and you don't know what's going to happen to her, but she did survive.
Yeah, it's funny, that whole that concept. I mean, I think in order for the movie to feel like a horror movie, it can't end on an up note.
Yeah, you
now
can't
that's not
leave
to say that
smiling.
it's not to say the movie can't be scary, and I think I still hold to that idea. Like, so The Conjuring, for instance, which is a great horror movie because it scared the living crap out of me, and Insidious. Well, actually, Insidious 1 doesn't. Insidious 1 ends on a down note.
Yeah.
But Insidious 2, I guess, ends sort of on an up note. But then, anyway.
But they're chapters. I mean, that's the one cool thing they have going for them in Insidious is they've already labeled the chapters. Like,
yeah,
so they're like, well, chapter 1 ends bad. Chapter 2 is a little more hopeful.
Yeah. In any case, check it out.
That is our show. Thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you check us out on iTunes if you're watching us now on YouTube. And if you're watching us, or if you're used to listening to our show, you can go to youtube.com/ECHORIFT video to see our YouTubes and tell us what you think. Subscribe, and that way we know you're there, and comment and all kinds of good stuff. It's fun. We're also starting to do YouTube-only content. So if you want to see everything that we do, you're going to have to go on over to YouTube and find out.
Yes. Let's go do our hair up in the Oculus. This has been an ECHORIFT production. Go to ECHORIFT.com to learn more.
I love it when stuff like that works out. That's going to sound really funny. It's going to sound edited. All right, we can stop our Audacity recording now.
I guess I better go over to Audacity and stop it.
And I'm going to stop I'm actually going to give it a little more lead time, and then I'll stop the broadcast. That came out really, really well.
Stop. However, let me. I guess I can just hit play, right, if I want to hear it.
Yep. I'm going to hit stop broadcast now. It's not going to disconnect us.
All right.